This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. For a free 10-day unlimited trial, visit lynda.com/MacVoices. Hi, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices at NAB in Las Vegas. We're in the Axle booth talking to Sam about Axle and what they're doing in relation especially to iOS. Sam, it's great to have you.
Great to be here.
So tell us about Axle and what all you're doing.
So we're a 3-year-old company, and our sort of founding principle is to make managing your media radically simple. And here at the show, we're introducing our first native iOS application called Axle Edit that takes the starting point of our media management software and then gives you the ability to edit and search and even capture and combine that with other media on your iOS device.
Wow, that sounds kind of interesting because we're all looking for easier ways to capture things and especially to edit it without having to carry so much around.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I was just at a conference in Ireland called MojoCon, Mobile Journalism Conference, and it was dynamite. You had a lot of the top news organizations from around the world, and they're all trying to figure out how to use iPhones and iPads as news gathering tools. It's tremendous.
So walk us through a sample workflow of how this would work, whether I'm shooting video with my GoPro, with my iPad, iPhone, or even something larger.
Well, let me talk about it in the case of the iPhone and the iPad specifically. Although we do work with GoPro, and we certainly work with DSLRs and C300s and all the way up to the really expensive cameras. But just to start with the iOS devices, a journalist would go and shoot something with their iPhone. Then they would actually bring that into the application, combine it with material that they've searched using Axle on their Axle server. So they might have, for instance, some B-roll or other footage that they want to bring in to combine. They would then put those together in the Axle Edit application, which I'll show you, and then they can either render a low-res version locally or send a sequence up to the server to be rendered in HD on the server.
And then it's used from the server?
Correct. Yeah, so you could send it to the web, send it to air, what have you.
All right, so I'm going to repeat it back to make sure I got it.
Sure.
So I'm shooting the video, say, on my iPhone.
Yeah.
I'm pulling, say, lower thirds and titles from the server, combining it there, and then it all gets uploaded to the server for someone else to download and use.
Yes, except right now we don't typically handle the lower thirds and titling yet. So it's more a matter of segments, like you find some B-roll, you find something that's relevant to what you just shot, and you want to stitch it together into a professional sequence.
Got it, okay.
Typically the titling and the lower thirds get handled on the server side before it goes to air.
What kind of editing tools, what kind of capabilities are you giving us on the iPad or iPhone?
Well, it's not designed to replace something like Final Cut or Premiere or Avid, right? Those are still the professional tools. This is designed as kind of a rough cutter. So you can mark in, mark out, you can trim, you can do audio levels and fade-ins and outs, and you can do some very simple effects between clips. You can also drop in stills and size the stills and position them. So a pretty wide range of stuff, but nowhere near what you would do in a high-end editor.
But at the same time, if you're doing that kind of shooting, you're probably not going to spend that much time in post. It's more a quick cross dissolve or something of that nature.
Exactly.
What kind of pricing are we talking about for this?
So Axle Edit is priced with the client and the server side, starting at $7.95 for 2 users and $16.95 for 5 users. In addition, it's really designed to be used with Axle itself, Axle 2015, our media management software, and that has very similar pricing per user. So you can get started in the very low thousands of dollars, but many of our professional customers will build things out using transcode modules. We have a very close partnership with Telestream, so a lot of our mid-sized systems will have Axle, Axle Edit, and then Telestream for transcoding, for instance.
How much space am I getting on the Axle server? How does that work?
Well, so there is no actual Axle server, it's actually your storage. So we work on-premise at your location, so if you want to go out and buy storage, whether it's in RAID form or network attached form, it's a very straightforward thing for you to add to the system.
Great. That makes sense. It certainly makes it a lot more affordable.
Right. The cloud storage is interesting right now, but is not yet at a price point or really a security standpoint where it's going to replace having your own storage. That's our feeling.
There's still that pesky security thing, isn't there?
Pesky security, yes. Ask Sony, I guess. But of course, there are great uses for the cloud. It's just about, I'd say 99% of the footage that gets shot today ends up on somebody's hard drive or shared storage. And that's really where we're targeting right now.
How's the response been to this at the show?
It's been unbelievable. We've had close to 600 people in the booth, and it's only the third day. And the booth isn't that big, and we're at the back of the hall. So it's just been a constant kind of press of people. And now that we're into the middle of the show, it's people sending their friends over and resellers bringing their customers over. It's partly because it's just cool to see real editing on an iOS device, but it's also, I think, the idea that media management can be something that anybody can do. It's been so exotic and kind of high-end, and you've needed weeks and tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it, and we're saying it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, is that what pushed you to develop something for iOS, the fact that we're seeing these high-quality cameras in our phones and you're seeing the demand for it?
Absolutely, that's right. I mean, 5 years ago this wouldn't have been possible, obviously. In fact, the original iPad did not have a camera. They just left it off, didn't think it mattered, and at the time, I'm sure they were fighting for every inch of space on the machine. But today, you just think, what do you mean an iPad without a camera? So it just shows how far video has come on these mobile devices, and it's clearly exploding, right? You've got hundreds of millions of people around the world walking around with HD capture capability. And then when something happens, like with the shooting last week, where someone's able to get something at the scene, it can have huge repercussions. So I think everyone is wide awake to the opportunities with this, even the larger news organizations. And we've had some very big, three-letter news organizations here in the booth talking about exactly these workflows.
Yeah, we've seen that in still photography, where I'm thinking of the Chicago Sun-Times example, where they let their photographers go and then everybody's shooting with iPhones.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon with the big news organizations, but it certainly gives them more flexibility, and you can't help but wonder what's down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting times, I would say.
Absolutely. So where do we send folks to learn more about Axle, and maybe they can implement it or adapt it to what they do?
We'd be thrilled. It's www.axlevideo.com. So axlevideo.com.
Sam, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Folks, we'll have more from NAB in Las Vegas. I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the MacVoices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free MacVoices magazine on Flipboard by visiting macvoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.